begin. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Peer's monthly meeting. My name is Kathryn Zoka and I'm co-chair of Peer. Tonight, we're privileged to have with us two Democratic grassroots leaders from Southold who will talk about how they created a blue wave in their last election. Kathryn Casey-Quigley and Greg Duroski are with us. We like to start our meetings with a land acknowledgement. We in Peer are graced to live on the ancestral territories of the Montaukett and the Shinnecock people. For those of you who are not familiar with Peer, Peer is a multi-issue grassroots organization committed to advocating for issues that impact all Long Islanders: healthcare, housing, climate, social justice, and more, through electoral politics and activist issue-oriented engagements. I will post in the chat Peer's Facebook page link and also a link to join us. We welcome you to join our group, and please do so. Okay. I'll also mention, for those who are not familiar with Peer, we are a chapter of NYPAN, which is a statewide organization. NYPAN stands for New York Progressive Action Network. So what to expect tonight? We'll start with some brief announcements. Then Jerry Maslanka, who is head of our Voter Registration and Voting Rights Committee, will introduce our guests. They'll have a conversation, and then we'll have some questions and answers. Drop your questions in the chat, and Tina will call on you once we pivot to the Q&A. So, brief announcements. First of all, for those of you who haven't heard the news, Peer had a few polls recently on endorsing candidates. And we're pleased to report that Peer unanimously voted to endorse Melanie Dorigo in CD3. We close to unanimously voted to endorse Skylar Johnson for the Senate District number 1. And just recently, by 70%, we voted to endorse Jumaane Williams for New York governor. So with those announcements come some actions. And one action is to get Jumaane on the ballot. And we have petitions for you to sign. If you are in the area in Sag Harbor tomorrow, stop by my bookstore, Canio's Books, to sign the petition. And afterward, Catherine Levy is going to be taking over the petitioning for the next week. We have one more week. We need to get a lot of signatures. So please contact Catherine to see how you can both sign a petition and possibly even take a petition to get signatures. Next, Peer's endorsement of Melanie comes with also a pledge to help her fundraise between now and the end of this quarter, March 31. So I'll drop in the chat an Act Blue fundraising page so that you can make a contribution to Melanie. She is hands down one of the best candidates I've seen on Long Island in many years, and we need her in Washington representing Long Islanders. Even though she won't actually be from our particular CD, she will represent us as all Long Islanders have shared interests. So please, if you can, any amount will be graciously welcomed by Melanie. Please support her. So that's it for my announcements. I'm going to pivot or turn it over to Jerry, who will introduce our speakers. And thank you all for being here tonight.
Okay, great. My welcome to everybody as well. So I have two short biographies here for Kathryn and Greg that I want to read because they're terrific. So Kathryn is the chair of the Southhold Democratic Committee. And in addition to that, she's co-founder, co-director, and of the Peconic Community School in Accobock. She founded Peconic Community School in 2012 with her sister Liz. The school serves children ages 3 to 12, and its vision is that education can create a better world. Prior to founding the school, she had worked on political campaigns and volunteer organizing through AmeriCorps. After Trump was elected, Kathryn joined the Southold Dems with the goal of helping to turn the town blue. She lives in Mattituck with her 2 children, Hannah and Noah, and her husband, Ryan, and their dog, Gracie. So also with us, we have Greg Duroski. Councilman from Southold Town. He is the vice chair on the town council. He was born and raised in Mattituck, where he and his wife Liz are raising their 2 young daughters. He graduated college with a degree in philosophy. He helped build and manage a successful brewery business and is currently the innovations director at Greenport Harbor Brewing. Greg serves as a deacon at the First Presbyterian Church of Southold, the congregation his ancestors, the Youngs, helped found in 1642. Wow. In 2019, Greg ran for supervisor of Southold Town, and he came within 170 votes, or 1.4% of winning. Quite a nice accomplishment there. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to Kathryn and Greg to tell us their stories about this blue star that we had on Long Island the last elections. As we know, it was mostly a red wave with very few Democrats being reelected or being elected to new posts, and Southold stood out. So let's hear how that happened and that journey.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jerry. And thank you to Pierre and everyone here for having us this evening. I believe really strongly in information sharing and celebrating and learning from both victories and failures. So I think it's really important to have these opportunities in these forums. So thank you for doing it. What Greg and I were thinking is that we would spend 10 minutes or so each giving a little bit of overview of sort of from our own individual perspectives of how Southold was able to have this great success in last November. And then we'll be happy to address your questions as I'm sure they'll arise as we speak. So when I first entered here this evening, I mentioned that there are a lot of familiar faces because I am no peer back from January 3rd, 2017, when 60 or so of us surprised Lee Zeldin in Riverhead and really took, it was the start of a wave of taking those offices by storm and making our presence and our outrage known. And that was really my first sort of re-engagement in local activism. And I started by getting really involved in Zeldin or anti-Zeldin initiatives and work. But I realized that my own little town was red and there was much that could be done right here. And so I set a goal to myself of flipping Southold blue. And so I got involved in the 2017 campaign and hopped on the committee almost immediately, and I guess it was probably March or April. So at that point, I knew very little about town committees and how they operated. And the Southold Town Committee had seen a lot of, they were pretty bruised, they had a lot of really dedicated, wonderful people who are still on the committee today, but had spent, 15 to 20 years of just losing. And it's been a hard run. It was a hard run for them. But we had a good candidate or a couple good candidates, and we just learned as we went and followed the, some campaign processes. In the meantime, simultaneously, because there was this huge wave of sort of energy and excitement and sort of realization that it's incumbent upon all of us to act and get involved. There were a lot of people stepping up and voter registration drives, were really happening everywhere, all over New York One, especially because I think people really realized there was an opportunity in this district. And Southold is unique for having a lot of second homeowners. I want to say sort of out at the outset that there was a tremendous amount of hard work that has gone into building this party over the past 5 years. And there's also been a tremendous amount of luck, sort of things that were really working in our favor. So it's, I always want to be really measured and balanced to make sure that it's, it was a combination of the two factors. I still believe that any community can do it, but not necessarily in 4 or 5 years, right? It may take longer if you don't have some of the sort of pieces and elements that we had. One of which, as I alluded to, was the second homeowners. There was a trend. So before 2017, of voter registration starting to move and go to more Democrats were registering, where Democratic registrations were outpacing Republican registrations. So you could see it happening. And that was part of what made me very optimistic for Southold way back in 2017. You could see that something was coming. And so actually, you'll see a broom behind me. It's a fun story about that. In 2017, after I was the campaign manager on that campaign, and we lost all of the town races, every single seat we lost. And the next day on the Suffolk Times, the Republican or GOP town chair was photographed with a broom. And I never forgot it. I didn't hold a broom myself this past November, but it was a gift from the committee because, and the same town chair as well on the GOP side. So we learned a lot from that race, and shortly thereafter, I became the chair of the party. And another sort of fortunate factor, I think, that really helped, and this was a question, it may have been Jerry or Kathryn, I'm not sure who asked it at the outset, just interested to learn how the committee dealt with new blood and new people coming on. I grew up in Mattituck, was born and raised here. And the Democratic town chair at the time I had known since I was a child. So there was a really helpful factor there of I didn't feel new to people. They all kind of knew who I was, and I had a real background. And I think probably the South Fork is similar to the North Fork in that, if you were born and raised here, you're from here. And if you weren't, you're not. And so it gives you an additional level of credibility, for better or for worse, that I think really helped as I took the helm. And I think people were excited to see just some new leadership happening within the party in general. So I sort of set out, when I took on the chair, 3 overarching goals. The first was to build the brand of the party. And I felt that if we could build the brand of the party, then we could also fundraise. And if we could fundraise, then we could recruit the candidates. So it was sort of a step-by-step, like, let's make it pretty cool and hip and awesome to be part of the Southold Dems, but let's make people want to be a part of this and feel like they're a part of something. Let's go out and raise some money, which is not something that had happened. And then let's find people who will say, you know what, this is worth a shot. And part of that branding really began with having a new, younger leader. And people really got on board. The committee was excited. People who'd been at it for a long time, I think, were fired up. The voter registration just kept happening and kept happening. That never stopped. And I know Pierre was very involved with that on the South Fork as well, doing very similar things, pulling lists in similar ways, targeting New York City homeowners. That still goes on to this day. It went on right through, October, or whatever the deadline was for this election. Another fortunate thing, I'm sort of skipping ahead here though, is the pace that voter registration accelerated due to COVID. So this trend that we saw happening, it just, fired up really quickly with COVID. So I just skipped a whole election there, but I just wanted to make that point since I was talking about voter registration. And just to give you an idea, I've been tracking the numbers since 2017. So in 2017, there were 4,700 Dems to 6,100 Republicans. That was March 2018. And then by 2022 is 6,100 Democrats to 5,900 Republicans. So we just flipped that tremendously. And that was, a lot of grassroots efforts. So I think, we were able to do some of that branding, some of that fundraising to a limited degree, and then recruiting the candidates. So again, I think that was a result of just myself and a few other newer people coming in and having different connections. I knew, just younger people in Southold town, people I had grown up with, like Greg. And so it was putting feelers out in the community that I think were different than other people had been able to put out and had connections that other people had. And I think what we did, we tried to be really professional, but in both cycles about having a screening committee, a really professional, thorough screening committee, and putting out as many feelers as possible for candidates, and then making sure they sent resumes and answered questionnaires to make sure that they were, very dedicated and interested, and then put them through a, pretty professional screening process of interviews. And then, the 6 or 7 of us on the screening committee were able to choose a slate. Greg, I originally pitched Greg for assessor. He's like, what, are you kidding me? Run me for supervisor. So that's, being able to find those people, I think. And I think then Greg found Sarah Napa. And so we just were able to find this really dynamic group of candidates that saw the trends. They saw what we had been doing over the past 2 years in really trying to build the committee and raise money. And maybe I'll turn it to Greg for a few minutes there. You can talk about that first campaign cycle and how many lessons were learned there.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a big learning process. And I think Kath touched on a bunch of important points, but one thing I think that was really important, and this is a major takeaway from both campaigns, is kind of the newness of things and how we were able to buck a number of trends that were typically the way things were done. And at points, we would be challenged sometimes by the committee, sometimes by the other side, for example. And they'd say, oh, that's not the way we do things. So typically the campaign cycle out here would start after Labor Day. As soon as Sarah Napa and I were nominated, we started the campaign immediately. And we originally received some pushback from the GOP. You can't do this. This is not the way we do things. It's like, that's why you folks keep on winning. And we're going to get out there. We're going to do everything we can. We're going to show up to all the board meetings. We're going to show up to all the public events. We're going to write articles and op-eds in the newspaper. And we're really going to get out there and present a platform to the public. And I think this ability, both last time and this time, for us to just look at the landscape and develop a strategy that we felt worked was very important. I guess I'm going to skip a little forward to this campaign and dig a little bit into our candidate selection process a little bit more, because I think that'll shed some light on some important features both of this campaign and last campaign. As Kathryn mentioned, we had a very professionalized process. And, from the outset, we were very fortunate, especially this time around, to have a bunch of candidates reach out to us to screen. Kathryn can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we screened over 50 candidates. And
wow,
we for
a lot.
It was a lot of work.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work, but it gave us the ability to really build out a campaign team that we felt complemented each other. And one thing that was very important for us from the beginning was diversity. So we ran the first 2 African-American candidates ever to run for office in Southhold Town. We ran the first openly LGBTQ candidate in Southhold Town history. We also, and this could be a little controversial, we ran 3 candidates who come from families that are, pretty strongly Republican. And I'm actually one of those people. But this diversity was important, we felt, because more voices kind of results in better policy. But from a campaign standpoint, the relationships that we had with different groups of people, perceived similarities we had with people, were definitely factors in motivating the public to vote for us and to give our candidates face time. I know, we've all been through the experience of knocking on a door, and you may knock on a door for a GOP person, and they may say, oh, well, I don't support your side, just keep moving along. But the ability of us to have personal relationships, so it was Greg going around knocking on what may be Republican doors with other candidates, it kind of gets everyone's guard down a little bit, and this is, I think, something that we thought was very, very important, and it developed kind of over time. As we look at the turnout numbers of different demographics, let's say of African Americans in Southold Town, typically very, very low in town elections. You have to ask the question why. But when the answer is that we've never run any African American candidates, it starts to make a little bit of sense. So we felt it was very important to have a diverse slate of candidates that reflected, diverse experiences, had diverse connections, and also had diverse kind of expertise. So we, had a farmer, we had an engineer, we had an oyster farmer. I'm a small business person. We had a sailboat captain, and we all, as we gave our stump speeches, we all kind of painted a picture of what the North Fork is, and our candidacy as a group kind of represented, the fabric of the North Fork. Another thing that was very important to us was building out a campaign team with the candidates. So as we were screening them, it was very, we impressed upon them that we were looking for people that were willing to work together as a team. We wanted to make sure that they complemented each other. So as we were looking at selecting candidates for the different positions, we didn't, let's say, want to, maybe what you would call civic association types running for one position together. We wanted kind of a diversity of experiences and kind of a diversity of representation, so they complement each other. And the same thing among the whole slate. It was very, very important that they complemented each other. They had different skill sets that worked together, because the other thing we were building out is not just a team of candidates, but it really was a campaign team. And we worked as a team to run our campaign together. We had weekly meetings from the get-go. We did all of our own branding, all of our own ads, and everything was kind of done together. The other big thing, and we felt very, very strongly from this from the beginning, is that we wanted to select candidates that were willing to fight. I think we've seen in the past that, and I think sometimes, we Democrats fall into this kind of category where we think the ideas will win, and you just kind of need to present the best argument. But it's not just about, I feel it's not just about, explaining why you're the right person. It's about explaining why the other person is the wrong person. And we were very, very clear that we felt that was necessary, and we needed people that were willing to fight for what's right, but also fight against their opponent to win this. And the other thing we were really looking for, and I think this speaks to the questionnaires we had people fill out. Really, these weren't just questionnaires; they were essays that we were asking people to write. We wanted people that were well prepared, who had an understanding of the core issues that were facing our town, who were articulate. And also, as we were speaking with them, we also felt like it was important that they were teachable. These are our committee brings a lot of experience, a lot of historical knowledge of the town. And, Sarah Napa and I were very engaged in this campaign too, from an educational standpoint, as was Sarah's husband, Anthony. And really just talking about the issues, figuring out the best strategy to push those issues forward and kind of moving it forward. So that, I guess I would say, is the important part about candidate selection.
Greg, could I interject
jump in.
a question?
Yep.
Yeah, both of you have mentioned that you developed a brand, that you tried to rebrand the party, and I wondered if you could maybe talk a little more specifically about how you described your brand. Thank you.
So for this individual campaign, we very early on settled on kind of the tagline "Southhold Forward," and that was on all of our branding. It was 3 triangles or 3 kind of arrows pointing to the side. We had all of our names done in the same sort of logo, and it was Southhold Forward. Early on, we did run into a little pushback from some people on our committee that we were not saying the word Democrat in some of our materials. But we made the conscious decision to kind of go with this Southold Forward thing, really push it forward. We had a very clear aesthetic. We actually put together a brand book. We had the colors, we had the logo, we had the font, and this again is where one of our candidates, her wife was a graphic designer. They kind of worked on putting that together. Another one of our candidates does website design. They put that together, and we pushed it forward. It was helpful that the committee had already done some fundraising and had really already established a pretty decent war chest by the time we nominated our candidates. So we were able to start purchasing bumper stickers and signs and magnets and all that very, very early on, and get that out there, get the brand out there, and start establishing the brand of the slate, which was Southold Forward, but also establishing the brand of each one of the individual candidates.
And I just want to jump in that while the Southold Forward aspect, didn't sort of use the word Democrat, I would say we were also proudly Democratic, right?
Absolutely,
so,
yes.
And I think that was part of the branding that we built, not only in that campaign, but the past campaigns. In Southold Town, Democrats had developed a reputation for hiding and countless stories of how many Democrats are registered as Republicans or registered independents because you can't get a job if you're, and so there was this so accustomed to being meek or being, you have to be center. You can't say too much. You can't ruffle too many feathers. And I came along and was like, screw it. Here's what we believe. Here's who we are. We're not, what do we have to lose? A, and B, what are we if we don't say what we are? People early on would tell me to stop being so political. And I would say, that's my actual job. Like, I'm the chair of a political party. So you can say that to other people, but my job is to be loudly and proudly political and partisan. And so, there were people who pushed back against that, but I think there were also, I think it brought people along because it was louder, it was more present, it was more in your face. As Greg said, the campaign started earlier. They were writing letters like, here we are. And I think that revved people up. And people then felt like they had something to get behind. We created a momentum and a feeling and a sentiment and an energy through all of that.
So
Yeah.
let me
I
just
was gonna
dive in
say-
and have sorry, Jerry, just two quick things and then I'll let you step in. Kathryn, you mentioned that the committee felt bruised, I guess, in 2017 when you first got involved. And, one of the challenges that a number of the committees are having throughout the different townships on Long Island is the interrelationship of this grassroots movement that emerged in 2017 with people who had been working, for a long time.
Yep.
And it sounds like it's gone remarkably well there, maybe through personal relationships, but that's one thing that I'd like to hear you both speak on. And the second thing is, in the last election cycle, for instance, Southampton Town also had a slight advantage in registration rolls of Democrats, and yet we did not succeed in getting the candidates elected. How were you able to energize and get the voters out to the polls? So those are two questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You want me to jump in on this first, or do you want to, Kath?
Yeah. Do you want to do the second
Yeah.
one? Do the second one. Yeah. Yeah.
About the issues?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, your perspective is issues. Mine is a little different. So you go first.
Getting
Okay,
people to
yeah.
the polls.
Yeah. So one thing we did from the beginning is advised our candidates to be very, very disciplined in the positions that they're taking, and make sure that they're clear on what they're saying. I think this was definitely something I learned from my first campaign, is that you can do more harm than good if you overstep just a little bit, or if maybe you get one little fact slightly incorrect, even if the larger argument is correct, you've lost it. So we were able to identify some emotional issues that cut across party lines. And they were two big issues. One was just fear of overdevelopment in Southold Town. And the other was a general feeling of just a lack of leadership. And maybe a over politicization of government. And a lot of our message was run through or really put through these lenses. And it allowed us, and I think if you look at the Southampton example, and where we maybe differed in Southold Town a little bit, GOP turnout in Southold Town was higher than Democrat turnout in Southold Town. But at least looking at the absentee ballots we counted, and our candidates were there counting the ballots, and we were counting, the numbers and whatnot. We were able to infer that we won the blanks 3-1. And it's really those blanks that we were able to bring along with our team, because we found similarities, and we stayed away from the national issues consciously. We stayed away from the culture war. We stayed away. There are clear problems in Southold Town that motivated people, that motivated our candidates to want to get involved. And we talked about them every chance we got. And, as much as, issues of race, let's say, have national implications, as we talked about them in Southold Town, it was through the local lens. It was through the local experience. It was something that was readily accessible to the whole community. And, I felt like, and we felt like that was very important. You can jump in, Kath.
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting because I think everything Greg said is true. Yet I have a completely different set of reasons that I'll give for why. And so sort of or sort of pulling back for a second, and any campaign will tell you this, it's not one strategy or one thing that wins you the race, it's all of them. And one of the things that excited me so much about this campaign and this team was that we ran as a slate. So it felt so much more powerful, right? Usually it's just one candidate, but we had 7. We were so powerful because we were able to be one team and doing so many different things, right? Like Candace says this, as a young Black woman, was able to have a presence and a voice and a message that was so distinct from Greg's, and yet they were on the same team. So they were able to inspire, the same or different groups of voters and like carry each other. But so while what Greg said about the issues, I totally agree with. What's in my mind is the data and how we use data in the campaign. And just one really clear example of that is one of our most important list was voted in 2020, but not 2019. So we said our federal only voters will win us this race because Perry Gershon won in Southold. Nancy Goroff won in Southold. And so in federal elections, we were winning for the past few years, but local elections, we weren't. So we said, if we can, because it's like 40% to 70% voters in local versus town. So if we can get that up to 60%, we can flip it. So our ability to target those voters and then message those voters. I mean, one of our most powerful, we had a road show basically, which was, we had over 25 meet and greets in which all 7 candidates attended, almost all of them. And there were, anywhere, the smallest was probably 10, the largest was over 100. And our candidates were so disciplined. They had their speeches memorized. I would get up and intro them and pitch them. It just had this whole energy and routine. And we would have some of our lines that we would use that would really fire people up. And one that Greg and I would fight over, sometimes we both say it, was that he lost by how many? 117?
117, yeah.
117 votes. So if each one of you goes out and gets 5 people who voted in 2020, but not 2019, will win. So I think it was helping people understand how powerful they could be, how much they mattered. And I think that's a lot harder thing to do in a town that's already, definitively blue, maybe, and how you get those folks to turn out and create that message of, we need you specifically because, or else we can't win this. So I think that helped a lot. And, just data in general. We have a volunteer on our committee person who's just phenomenal with collecting data. We struggle in our ability to manipulate it and use it. So one of the things I've been thinking about that I wanted to share is the importance of constantly building on what you've gained. So using, the reason our campaign this year was so good is because Sarah and Greg trained our candidates from soup to nuts. And they put together like a whole plan and manual to make sure that our candidates were like on fire. And now what we're doing is we feel like our data management is not where we want it to be. So the committee is really focused on finding a data management software that can allow us to be more effective. But that kind of brings me into your first question, which is, how do you manage sort of the, for lack of a better term, infighting? And I've seen what you mentioned with regard to kind of the activists and energized activists that have come out of 2017, or some of whom were already there who can't break through the committee systems. I don't have an easy answer for that. I think, we did have a lot of luck and that I was able to become chair. If I hadn't been, I may have gotten frustrated down there and been like, oh, I'm going to go find another route. However, my advice would be keep going, keep fighting, stay on those committees, keep building. Our committee argues constantly, that people are mad at me all the time. And during the campaign, there was a lot of tension between the candidates who had never done this before. Many have never done this before, and the committee who've been doing it for 30 years, and the committee feeling frustrated, like, why aren't you using us? Why are you keeping us out of the loop? We don't feel enough a part of this. And we had to do a lot of managing of that and just keeping them along, keeping them on board. We need you, we value you, but they're going to keep going and doing what they're doing. And that's just, like the patience of the organizing process, I think. And my hope is that, that this, one of the things I said in the last session that we did is that everything that happens in an election is an opportunity. So if you win, it's an exciting opportunity, but if you lose, there's such an exciting opportunity as well. You get so much data from every election, so much information that you can use. And you get all these new people who are like, this can't, people are pissed that this happened, as they should be. And, while change isn't necessarily as sudden or overnight or full as you want it to be, I'm seeing some movement in the county party that gives me some hope that they're seeing changes that need to happen. Doesn't mean every town party is going to improve, doesn't mean the whole county will, but I feel like if we keep at it, we can find our ways in. And I, just as an example, I've seen the county is, I'm seeing the town parties connect more than they have in the past. In just the past 6 months, they're working together more than they have. The Islip Town Committee is rebuilding. There's a lot of work happening with the committee in Riverhead that they're trying to create some real change there. So I hope that the losses will, continue to sort of light fires under us.
I think this part,
Mm-hmm.
I think this part about not being scared of arguing is really important. And something that, as a candidate, we had arguments about things and positions to take, positions not to take, what we felt about things. But they made us stronger candidates, and we were still committed to the goal of getting everyone to win. And I think we saw that on the committee too. As much as, some committee folks may not have been happy that some of the candidates weren't, talking about an issue that they wanted to talk about, I think we were able to come together with the shared goal. And I think we all were committed to hearing each other out and moving forward. And it was very, very helpful that Kathryn was able to be kind of the decision maker and the ultimate decision maker of this as it relates to the committee. And we did empower our candidates to kind of make decisions. And, they did not have a party platform that they had to sign on to begin with. And everything was kind of developed over the course of the campaign. It in some sense led to more work, but I think we were also able to model to each other the behavior that we'd like to see as elected officials. And it really helped us develop trust with each other. Even though it may not be terribly fun, if you're having a spirited disagreement with one of your teammates, in the end, the decision needs to be made, and you need to move forward. And the number of days to the election don't change. They go down every day. So you get closer and closer to the election, and you have to let past decisions go and just keep moving on. And I think the more we can do that as committee folks, the better off we'll be too.
And I also just want to add, I think, I mean, you all know this, so but because you are all activists and you all take initiative, but I think, oftentimes the committee can just be a vacuum. If there's not a lot of leadership happening, then there's not many meetings, there's not much organizing, you don't know what's going on. And my suggestion would be, and take it with a grain of salt, because I can't say that it would work in every scenario or situation, but just start doing things. Like, when's the next meeting? Oh, do you want me to put together the agenda? Oh, how's this agenda look? I'm happy to help facilitate the meeting if you like. I created a Zoom link. Just start doing the things, but as a partner, or I formed a little subcommittee of people on the committee who are interested in, pursuing data, doing more work with data. And we're going to meet with the Southold Dems about what they're working on, to kind of just have these side hustles. But, and you all have your side hustle through peer. I really believe deeply, and I said this on a call with some of you, in continuing to work through the Democratic Party and force the Democratic Party to act. Because if we don't have an active Democratic Party, we cannot make the political change that we need to happen. And right now, as we know, it needs to happen on school board levels. It needs to happen, it's everywhere. So, and it's the most basic sort of fundamental door-to-door, know your neighbors. And that's another thing. If you know these voters better than the committee people know their voters, you can pipe in, but I say that with a total humility and no assumptions that you haven't already tried a million of these things and banging your head against a wall. Real empathy for that.
The only other thing I would add to that, and this is maybe going to approach this from a slightly different angle. I think it's also easy, and we saw some of this during the campaign. We had some more activist-minded folks that were really focused on a single issue. And if that issue did not become kind of part of the platform or part of the speech, they almost started going after the candidates. We had this one individual who, is a longtime Democratic Party supporter. And because one of the Republicans spoke about deer and none of our candidates spoke about deer, she actually wrote this email blast out to all the civic associations members supporting this GOP candidate because he mentioned deer. And it's very, very important that we, know the time for kind of debating the issues with each other, and also can kind of move forward. And maybe we disagree on the tactics or even disagree on the strategy, but can agree that, all right, maybe we'll disagree on this point, but we need to move forward together because we're not going to get anywhere alone. Yeah. And this could sound somewhat cynical. We need to win. The most important thing is winning. And the question is, how do we get there?
Yeah, I would add to that. Part of what I've seen my role as is a mediator and a uniter. So, and I just feel like that's what the chair should be. And I do feel proud that our committee does have people from, the very progressive spectrum and much more conservative Democrats. And we're, you were unanimously behind every one of these candidates. Yeah. And that I try to stay away from getting involved in single issues. And I'm in favor of a platform, but a broad one, without really diving into specific issues as the party, because I want us to be working towards a collective goal in which we can all unite behind. And then once, like Greg is finding now, once you're elected, have those fights, and I send him committee people, like somebody wants to talk to you and that's, now it's your time, but, our job is to get them in. I really believe in that. there are challenges we haven't faced yet that I think will be really interesting, once there's more, primaries within our own, town. I expect, and this is probably something you on the South Fork have dealt with a lot, I expect our infighting to get much worse because our party is going to be more powerful. So there's going to be a lot more people who want to have a voice and want to have a, their influence and pull us in one direction or another, which, that's a good problem to have. Not to say it's going to be fun, but I do expect that to come. And it is what's unique about your challenge. I think it's a powerful party, but with that power comes maybe a level of complacency that's been frustrating. I don't know. I don't know too much about the internal happenings in the Hamptons, but
yeah. Well, listen, first of all, I just want to compliment both of you. You've done a remarkable job at organizing the party and organizing the people on the North Fork to vote for your candidates. And I'm wondering if you have spoken to the Southampton Democratic Committee, or if you've had a conversation with the chair of that committee.
I know Gordon. I wouldn't say we've spoken at length with regard to organizing. No, we know each other we're in the same meetings, and we know we're friendly with one another. And I'd be, happy to spend time with anyone on the committee, or more time with Gordon. But that hasn't happened to date.
I guess they haven't reached out to you guys either.
No, and there is always so much more that I want to do and wish we could do, and work sort of more party building within the local parties is definitely on that list. I feel remiss in that I am not as connected as I would like to be with the other town chairs, and I'd love for that to be happening, somebody organizing us to do that, because we can only do so much.
We can encourage that potentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, what about East Hampton as well? I guess the same would apply, that there hasn't been really any communication with East Hampton's Democratic Club.
Not a lot. No, I knew Kate, and now remind me of, I don't even know his name.
Jerry Mulligan is the
Jerry. Yes. Yeah. We've met, but there were meetings happening at the county level with the town chairs prior to the election. But once the election happened, I think everybody got pulled in their, obvious campaign directions. So, but I do think that's something that we're looking to do, is just much more, information sharing, pushing. I was trying to encourage competitions between the towns, just friendly competitions, and just ways to motivate and excite people and build community.
What I think might be helpful is this thing about registering the new homeowners, et cetera, because you have that special person there that has done yeoman's work of the data and keeping on top of all of that. And I think East Hampton also had maybe a committee that was working on new homeowners, new, registrants or something in that. But if maybe the clubs could communicate together on that and build, would be important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, so should we open it up to questions? Are we ready for that? For
just about. I'm just going to ask one last question, and then I see Joanne has a couple of questions. And that is the outreach to the youth vote. If you would talk about how you were able to be successful with that.
Greg, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think some of, again, the diversity of our candidates, we had young people that were running, and we had, people in different age groups, and, through their social circles, through events, we had meet and greets at the brewery. We had meet and greets at the local coffee shop. We were out there.
We did a playground.
We did a playground meet and greet. And every one of our candidates was very active in the community before they ran for office. And we were able to tap into their networks and their relationships, and that was, in some sense, it made it easy, because that was their cohort. And I don't believe we did, in my campaign for supervisor, we did do a few targeted mailings to college students to try to get them to do absentees. We did not do any of that this time, I believe.
But I think I just can't underscore enough the screening committee process.
Yeah.
And if you're able to, if you're on your committee already, and just we start screening in January. So next January, we will start our screening process. And it takes about 3 months. We start putting feelers out in, November, December. But we're actually, having our screening interviews starting in January. And I think one of the things that was fascinating about that process is people that we thought would be on the top of our list as potential candidates. Once we spent time really thinking about their candidacy, it was like this, they're a very prominent business owner, but they don't even know the issues. They don't know anything about what's going on in town hall. They can't answer these questions, or, surprisingly look at their voting record. Wait, they didn't vote in the last 2 town elections. Like, no, but yet they have a big name, or, somebody who, people who were big in the, flipped from Republican to independent. And that would have been somebody that the Democrats chose in the past. Like, oh, this person's an independent voter. They were a Republican. Let's run them. And I think that's something that we're like, nope, we're gonna believe in ourselves, and that matters. That matters to voters. They see that. They see what you're doing. If you want to motivate a Democratic base, and you're putting people up for office that aren't even Democrats. Democrats aren't dumb. They see that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right. So then, Tina, I think would you please take care of our people with questions for our guests?
Okay, there's not many questions here yet, but Joanne, are you still here, Joanne?
Yes, she is.
Okay,
I'm still
Joanne,
here.
do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to read it?
Well, I can ask it. I can also have another question too.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, sure.
I think house parties are really, really important. The meet and greets. Okay. Jamie, I keep telling this story about how Jamie Raskin, when he ran his first congressional race, had close to 400 house parties, not one single mailing, and no commercials, and he won. And there's really a lot of value to them. But what you said was you had all of the candidates at all of them together.
Yep.
You did a house party, the whole slate was there.
Yeah, just about. So the house parties was really, it was an Obama, inspired thing. I mean, that's the handbook is house parties. So
Yeah.
we were pretty excited to really put those into action. And all 7 candidates were at 90% of the house parties, I'd say. Would you agree, Greg? I mean, a couple of people, had to work or had something going on, but if that happened, somebody would pitch them. But yeah, the attendance and the work ethic of this group of people was unmatched. Greg,
I think the important thing about the house parties too, it was not without controversy. Some folks thought that we were, kind of quote unquote preaching too much to the choir. We were out there kind of speaking to some of the same people over and over again. And really our time would be better spent knocking on doors of, quote unquote persuadable voters. And, I remember, I think it was actually election night, Kath, you and I were like, this will be a test whether this strategy worked.
Mhm.
Because there were some pretty prominent voices who, if they weren't outright critical of it, at least were questioning whether we should be spending so much time. Especially as the campaign went on, there were some days where we had 2 meet and greets on a weekend. On one day, one on the next day, and that was a lot of the candidates' campaign time. And I would say, at least compared to other campaigns, our candidates knocked on far fewer doors than would be recommended, but they spent far more time at these sort of meet and greets and these sort of social gatherings than maybe is typical.
I want to add two additional benefits of these house parties. They raised a ton of money.
Ton of money.
A ton of money. I mean, every single house party raised about, around $2,000 at a minimum. So, this campaign, we raised about $90,000 or so, maybe more, Greg, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
How many people would be there? How many attending?
Anywhere between 10 and 100, just depending on the event itself. And most of them were not ticketed. It was just come, and then there'd be an ask. I or somebody would make a pitch for checks. Some of them were fundraisers. A couple of them were, like Orient had a fundraiser and set a goal of raising $20,000.
Yeah.
And we're like, what? That's crazy. And they hit it. They did it.
So COVID did not impact your house parties?
We got really lucky with the weather.
Yeah.
I think it was like rain at 1 or something. We got so lucky with the weather. They were all outside. But the other benefit, is just how much it prepared our candidates.
Yeah.
So our candidates made absolute fools of the GOP when it came to debates and candidate forums. I mean, and that just feels good.
Yeah.
Plus it,
Yeah.
so because our candidate, they had their speeches, they were polished, they were prepped, they had it memorized, they hit all their points because they had practiced.
We were doing question and answers with live people, and sometimes it got a little contentious. So, our candidates became very skilled at kind of, weaving and bobbing around and kind of getting their talking points out there. And by having all 7 candidates there, we all kind of took notes for each other during, it really was like debate prep, as Kathryn mentioned, and kind of candidate school doing these meet and greets because we were all there. It was awesome. It was really, really awesome.
Yeah. And just to see them then go up against the GOP that, was it when they
crushed them.
It was their first public, the first time they'd spoke to an audience was, late September, early October, and they had no practice and no preparation. And it was, you almost wish that like the whole world could see it because it was hilarious just to see it.
It was really, really something.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, just, I don't know where this fits in, but one thing we did this time too, when Sarah and I ran last time, we both had our own individual candidate campaign committees where we were fundraising individually. And that did lead to some complexity. We did a fair amount of meet and greets then. But if both candidates are getting up asking for money for themselves, it felt like the individuals at the meet and greets were less likely to give because they didn't want to just give to one candidate. I did have my own campaign committee this time, but I did not do any asks at the group meet and greets because none of the other candidates did. And we were raising money for the committee team, the campaign team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this kind of team approach was very, very good. It again led to some of its own complexity because, we were kind of making the decision about who was going to get ad time and who was going to get space here and there. Ultimately everyone I think was happy with where things ended up. But it did, I guess I'm speaking more as a committee person now than a candidate. It definitely made things easier, I think, for the committee to have one committee. You donate money to the one committee, and that's kind of it. Now as a candidate, I did feel very strongly, and I felt strongly enough to have my own campaign committee so I could raise funds and spend it myself. But it's definitely something to consider.
If I may just ask, because we're on this thing about the house parties. So was there a pitch then to those who attended to, also speak with their neighbors, pull in their friends, all of that when they left that party to go talk about?
Absolutely. And this is where that joke that, Kathryn and I, we would steal this line from each other at the house parties. And it was kind of a running joke when she would say it first or I would say it first. But because we had tangible numbers, and I think, the other thing, Kathryn talked about luck was really important. Momentum is really, really important in these sort of campaigns, because we really got people kind of on board. And because I got so close last time, because Sarah won last time, there was already some momentum going. And one of the nice things about these meet and greets is there was a lot of excitement there. So we were building momentum. And this is where we threw that number out there, that if every single person here invited 5 people to vote who didn't vote last time in the local election, we're going to win.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to win. I lost by 117 people. That's a very, very tangible number. That's a very solvable problem.
Yeah. And so we would give them, make your list. Who are those 5 people? What else can you do? Host a house party. So a lot of people and this is like the theory of house parties, right? The reason you have a house party is to get more people to host house parties. And so that's what would happen. So then people who would come would be like, well, I can host one of these. I got friends, they'll donate. And so, it's giving a list of, what are the 3 or 4 things you can do before November 3rd that can, help win this election and be a part of, I think we were talking a lot about you can make history, which they did. Yeah. You can make history in Southold town. And it was, one of the most historic elections we've ever had in the town, both from the number of, we've never elected 6 Democrats in one election in the entire
history, in the recorded history of Southold town.
And we've never elected a Black elected official. And never elected a LGBTQ elected official. So it was all 3 in 1. So fun to talk about. Thanks for having us.
Kathy Levy has her hand up.
Have it on the town board better.
Wait, Joanne said she had.
Kathryn can talk first if she wants to. Especially, mine is a totally different subject.
Okay, go ahead, Kathryn.
I have 2 questions too, but I'll just ask one of them. And if there's time, I'll ask the other one later. I'm so inspired by everything you've said, but particularly what you've said about the candidate recruitment and screening process, which is completely unlike the Southampton Town Democratic Committee. And I believe it's completely unlike the East Hampton Town Democratic Committee. Have any of the, excuse me?
I'm sorry. I should turn my,
have any of the committees in our area, let's say Eastern Suffolk or Long Island in general, and the Suffolk County Committee reached out to you and shown an interest in this new kind of screening and vetting process? Because I think that's the key to changing the Democratic Party, what you guys did in terms of candidate recruitment and vetting. Has anyone done that?
No, I don't even know if they know how we approached it. The first time that I was involved in it was 2017. Somebody else was kind of taking the lead and I was just attended the screening sessions. And so it was sort of it was just a less formal version. And then there were people on the committee that were like, let's do this better. Like, can't we do this better? And I was like, well, we should be a job interview. So why not treat it like the job application? But we haven't, actually, that's a good point. I should reach out to, the county and just say, how about we talk about candidate recruitment and screening as a topic for a, future meeting.
Yeah.
Well, I think we as an activists have to make sure that everybody in the committees that we're in contact with know about this different way of screening and recruiting candidates, because I don't think that people have even imagined doing this, Kathryn and Quigley. So I really think that we need to make it clear to people that there's a different way of doing things, and maybe you can join with us to try to do that, because I think you guys have created a model that all the committees should follow.
Well,
and
we
it
were
was some.
Go ahead.
On, Kath.
I was just going to say quickly, we were very lucky in that our screening committee, now I chose the screening committee that, so it wasn't a vote or an election. I decided who was going to be on the screening committee. And I do think having, I feel like that power was important because it can't be just anybody. And, because I wanted to build consensus. I was very thoughtful about making sure that, I wanted several long-termers choosing. They've put a lot of years into this. They're going to be on the screening committee. But we were lucky that we had a lot of consensus in choosing our slate and candidates. We didn't really have any fights over any of them, but I imagine that would be incredibly likely for any committee to sort of be like, I want this person, no, I want this person, and that would be a hard position to be in. And again, a combination of probably luck and leadership that allowed that to happen. But I do think simply instituting that process is a way to filter the wheat from the chaff just to begin with, right? You can have somebody, that Joe thinks is going to be their best friend and a phenomenal candidate, and then they can't spell. And it's like, well, obviously, choose them. So, but Greg, did you want to say something?
Yeah, the only thing I would just add to this is as much as I was a previous candidate, so I was a logical choice to be nominated in the next campaign, I still had to go through the process. I still had to, write my essays. I still had to submit an updated resume. I did not participate in any of the screening of the other town board candidates. It was, I think sometimes we see, and this happens all over the place, where there's certain party insiders that, are kind of the heir apparent for certain seats, and they're just kind of put in those seats or put in those positions to run. And there may be better candidates. We really did have an eye on selecting the best candidates and the most qualified candidates, and everyone had to go through the process.
It also sounds like you cast a very wide net. I mean, if you're going to recruit a lot of people to go through the screening process, then you're going to have a better field of candidates to choose from, obviously.
And I would
And
also
that's
say it gave us a what's the word? A leg to stand on when we said thank you, but you're not the right fit this time, because we respected the process for them. You don't want to say, oh, I'm sorry, no, we chose somebody else, without saying, give us your materials, give us an interview, let's check your references, let's spend, because then you can let's call the person back and say thank you for stepping up and offering to throw your hat in the ring. We think it's not quite right this time for these reasons. And that, it's important to keep people's integrity intact, because, deciding to do something like this, well, sometimes it's narcissists stepping up, other times it's just good people, and you want them to come around. So many of the people we interviewed, we said, please come back in 2 years.
And they will. Yeah,
yeah.
A few of them even held house parties for us,
Mhm.
and I think this is where this kind of transparent process, we explained the kind of logic to everyone, and, called the people that weren't selected, and, just like a good job interview, and, kind of explained the why and the why not. And, I think there was faith in the system, that it was fair, and that there was a kind of a method to our madness. So
And I think that same idea can be said for sort of just committee infighting in general. Like, let people give their perspective, let people share their insight, let people have their views, respect, listen, hear them out, and be respectful when you say, we're going to go in this direction instead. Because I think even though we've had a lot of frustration on the committee and a lot of arguments, people have stayed with us, we've had a lot of long phone calls with a lot of committee people, and in the end, they're like, they stay with it, because I think it's about reminding people that this is bigger than them. This is not about just you and me and us. It's about a movement, and it's about change for the greater good. And if we can just bring it back to that and cool down about, X, Y, or Z that we're fired up about, it's, for the better.
And having a committee chair that wants to do that also helps.
Yeah.
Minor detail.
Okay, Joanne.
My
Yeah.
other question is, when I kept saying to everyone, they won Southold, but then when I saw Newsday's map, it was like Southold stayed red, the township of Southold, but then Greenport and that whole area around Greenport is what went blue. Did you specifically try to focus on just that area? Did you?
Yeah, so we did. You can go, Kath.
No, go ahead, Greg.
All right, so this is where the data came in and was really important. And I think, another kind of sense of diversity among the candidates is we did have candidates from all of the different hamlets. So we were able to kind of make inroads there. We did definitely get crushed in some areas. But, it's important, with any election, you need to figure out what your win number is and then figure out how you build to that win number. And we figured out a win number and targeted certain areas and honestly kind of, didn't target other areas. And, we did do, so for example, last time when I ran for supervisor, I kind of took my own home ED district for granted. It is very red, but I know a lot of people here. I didn't really do any campaigning here, and I lost in it. This time around, did a fair amount of campaigning here, knocked on a lot of doors in my neighborhood, and that's where I focused a lot of my attention, and I ended up winning in the ED this time. The people are still the same. You just got to get out there and you got to make kind of informed decisions. Now, there's some areas of Southold town that are just so heavily red that you're not going to win there. It doesn't make sense to knock on doors there.
Well, that said, Eric and Dan were still walking around East Marion, which is like, they're walking on the, just knocking on the unfriendliest doors.
We at one point, and we kind of joked around because Dan, Eric, and I, and we were the three candidates that come from kind of Republican or conservative families. We would just kind of, at a certain point in the campaign, we ditched kind of the data and at least in our door knocking, and would just go walk down whole neighborhoods and knock on every single door. And, we did have some interesting conversations and, some people that, knew that we were Democrats and didn't want to talk to us.
Nobody shot you?
No one shot us. We did have, a bunch of debates about abortion and gun control and all of the issues that town government has absolutely nothing to do with. But, it was definitely, we did that on 3 days, so it wasn't a big thing. But
do you think you got any votes as a consequence of that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We definitely did. And I think, did it change the election outcome for us? Probably not. But, I think it was important. And it was also, I think as we talk about momentum, we were very, very vocal about the neighborhoods that we were walking in on social media. And, at some point, and I kind of had a weird relationship with one of the gentlemen that I was running against. He would text me and call me, 3 or 4 times a week, just to kind of try to taunt me and whatever. And, we were kind of taunting them through social media by these kind of clearly Republican neighborhoods that we're walking in. And it was funny. We joked around that the campaign is a unique opportunity for a very subtle troll. So
and Joanne, I think that the one thing I would add to that is just, we didn't take a single vote for granted. We just, in such a small town, we have that advantage that we can think that. I mean, everybody should think that way, that you don't think it, but we spent an entire day traveling by boat to Fisher's Island, which
Yeah.
we knew maximum was, 70 votes maximum.
But we
but we got
netted
them.
70 votes there.
We
netted.
got more votes than we would have had we not gone.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Peoples, who's the lesbian candidate or elected now, who won trustee. Her race took weeks and weeks to be decided. She won by, I think, 12
votes.
12 votes. So Candace Hall, who is the only candidate that lost, she was running for clerk. Elizabeth Peoples would not have won had Candace Hall not been running for office. So, it's a way of seeing the interconnectedness of all these people. And so often town elections, to me, the biggest takeaway is how awesome running as a slate is and running as a team. Because, if every one of these candidates had been running as an island, which they just wouldn't have won, which in 2017, it was practically an island. 2019, it was more united, but not as. And then in 2021, it was a total gelled group. And it's like, they carried each other into office.
So I have another question if we have time for it. And it's about those blanks. I have been trying to convince people for decades who are independents, not affiliated, to join the Democratic Party and convince them that they can change the Democratic Party by doing that. And I believe that deeply. Do you think it's worth any of your effort to try to convert those blanks to Democrats? And if so, are you trying to do it?
You go first, Greg.
So I think for me, it's a question of when you do what. I think, once the campaign has started, and I think this is me more speaking as a candidate, it's not worth, the most important thing you can ask someone for is their vote. And you don't want to start asking for things that aren't gonna get you their vote. So if you're going to start arguing about the reason to vote for the Democratic Party or some other thing that's not absolutely necessary for you to win, I think there's more downside risk.
I don't mean during the campaign. I mean Kathryn is talking about how you can build upon what you've done. I'm talking about going forward.
Absolutely. So I was just saying, as the first part during a campaign, no. I think during a non-campaign, and this is where maybe the national election, is a good chance to do it, because one of the most compelling reasons to register for a party is so you can vote in a party primary. And if you're unhappy with the candidates that you're getting and you're a blank, it's kind of your fault because you're not involved in the selection process. So I think that's a very, very compelling argument to make. You do run into issues though in a small town, and we're even seeing it now when we have a split board, especially when there's a long-term, in Southold town, there was long-term single party rule. And it just was kind of accepted that if you wanted a job in the town, you needed to be a Republican. I had people who had my yard sign that, code enforcement showed up to their house and was giving them a hard time about their hedge. Yeah, because it was too close to the road. The hedge has been that way for 10 years. Was it my sign? Who knows? But there's at least the perception of party politics. And, that is something people need to contend with. And, I think no matter what, even if it's during an election time, not during an election time, it's important to determine who your supporters are and who you can kind of count on when the election does come along. And this is where our data is very important. We do track, who's writing letters to the paper about what issues, conversations that we've had with people, when our candidates are out there knocking on doors and they express support, we're tracking that data. All of that information is important. Yeah,
I think I would add to that. I think it's a really good question. It's not, I don't think I would focus my energy on getting blanks to register as Dems. I think I care about if those blanks are going to vote for Dems. But I think, there's something which you probably are all familiar with, and I actually haven't read enough about it. I would like to read more about deep canvassing.
Yeah.
And the
Yes.
whole idea is that you're meeting people where they are. I think people
Yeah.
who are registered blank have really made a decision that they
Yeah.
don't want to be with a party. And so if you're going in trying to convince people that they should do something that they've already decided not, from some philosophical perspective that they don't want to do, I'm not sure that's where I would focus, my energy.
Yeah.
I want them to help us win. I want them to be a part, people can be involved with the Democratic Committee if they're not registered Democrats. We've got independents, who are really active within our party. Yeah, I think it's more about who they're going to vote for. I want to know who's going to vote for us, and learning that, our data person has a whole list of our blanks that we know are ours. And I think maybe I would spend more time on non-voters, because not as many of them have made a philosophical decision to not vote necessarily. So I would probably spend more time trying to convince non-voters to join the Democratic Party and vote.
Or federal only voters. This is something that, to your point earlier, Kathryn, something we really focused on this time, with postcard campaigns, with, other things. These are people that we know are engaged in the process, right? But there's some reason that they're not voting in the local election. So it's kind of an easier hurdle to get them over.
Which is another reason I love local politics. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
It's fun, like people who vote in federal elections, like they're already motivated enough to get out once every 2 to 4 years. You can get them if you can just reach them and connect with them and convince them. It's such a fun pitch, especially these days, when it's a more powerful message than ever, because we can see what's happening at local levels across the country. You got to vote in your school board races. Look, like this is your power. This is it. This is saving our democracy is happening right here in your town. So totally agree with that.
We have a question from Barbara Fontana. Barbara, you here?
Mhm.
You want to ask your question, or do you want me to read it?
Unmute yourself, Barbara. Yeah. That'll help.
Would definitely help, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm a Democratic committee person in my ED. I'm in Brookhaven town. And I guess I've been doing it for 6 or 8 years now. And I find it very frustrating that so many Democrats don't come out and vote. And, candidates will say, oh, do phone banks, or they'll say, go door to door. And I'm wondering and I've done all of that. I've done postcards to the people in my ED that I paid for myself and the postage myself. And I think I have a heads up because I've lived here for more than 40 years, so I know a lot of people. But still, I'm wondering what you found most effective. And I listed, is it the candidates knocking on the doors? Is it the volunteers, or someone like me who's the committee rep? Is it personal postcards written by volunteers? Because I've certainly done a lot of those over the years. Is it phone calls or phone banks? When people have a limited amount of time, where should I be telling them, if you can only do one thing, this is what you should do?
I may have an unsatisfying response to that, which is yes. All of it. I don't know. I think it's that multi-pronged strategy that we discussed. My mother is a passionate Democrat. I mean, she just lives and breathes Rachel Maddow, and but she literally would die before she would knock on somebody's door. but she'll do handwritten postcards, and there's hundreds of people like that. So write postcards. I'm not gonna, anything that anyone will do, they should do. If you're willing to do 10 of those things, do all of them, I think that's, whatever anybody can do is what we need. And I don't know data wise, research wise, I don't necessarily know the answer. And I don't know if it's consistent in campaign by campaign. I mean, Sarah Napa will tell you she knocked on, I don't think she knocked on a single door in her 2019 campaign and she won.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I knocked on, over 1,000 doors in my 2019 campaign. Sarah, who won, so I lost. Sarah won, and she knocked on, I think, less than 20 doors. She did go out door knocking one day.
Yeah.
And she won. I think, overall, we knocked on very few doors this campaign. This time around, we did a lot of other things. I think the most important thing to determine is how you're going to reach people, because you need to reach different people different ways.
Yeah.
And this is where, again, determining what that win number is and figuring out how you're going to build that coalition to get you there.
Yeah.
And it is, it's postcards to some people, it's meet and greets for some people, it's in front of the post office with some people, it's not, to Kathryn's point, it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And
maybe I should point out too that I'm asking because I think where you live in general is similar to where I live. It's more of a small town feel. I live in Wading River. It's 8,000 people.
Right.
It's not like a big place.
Yeah.
Well, it's in a very inefficient use of your time to knock on doors in Southold Town. You can go out for 3 hours and sometimes knock 25 doors.
Right.
And maybe half the people are home.
Mm-hmm. That spread
so
out.
You're spending 3 hours to speak to 10 or 12 people.
Mm-hmm.
That if you have a win number, even 5,000, that's months of time knocking on doors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would add, just going back to the house party thing, I think, obviously we didn't reach anywhere near Obama level house party, but when we talked about our strategy at the start of the campaign, it was, how do we get these people so we don't have to knock on all their doors? So, ideally every ED, there's somebody having a house party in every ED, and they're reaching out to their list of their neighbors and saying, will you come to my house? Now, what percentage of them is going to come? Not many, but maybe, remember Sandy, who's our campaign coordinator, she had one in her community and many of her neighbors came. She said she dropped the flyer off with them. She said, I'm your neighbor. It's outside. There'll be drinks, and and people just showed up, and we got their vote that way. So I think that was also it's very efficient and it's very effective way to, because it's less intimidating. I just went door knocking this weekend, and people don't want to answer their door. They don't want to. I was with my daughter. I always take my daughter along. Maybe it's because she's getting older, but I noticed that people were even less, even with her there, were less interested in wanting that form of contact.
Sure. On my walk list, I now have noted people have said, don't come,
And I think one of the things that we tried to do all along was, let's evolve. Yes, you have your tried and true tactics. Yes, we should advertise. Yes, we should knock on doors. Yes, we make phone calls. Yes, we should use data that's all tried and true stuff, but also let's try new things. Let's not use palm cards. Let's do these cool baseball cards and and just let's turn things on their head and be unique and different and try things out. Because and if you can't do it and try it at the local level, where else can you do it? So not being afraid to sort of step out of the traditional confines of how things are done.
I'm going to step in.
We
have one more question from Joanne, and then we're going to wrap up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Unmute Joanne. Yeah.
Can you send us the slate of questions that you gave to all your candidates? Because we're going to have that issue right now in LD4 where I am in Brookhaven. And
For screening, you mean?
yeah,
Oh, sure.
okay. I have a whole lot of questions here, but were any of you running against incumbents as opposed to running against new people?
Not this time. We got very lucky. We were running against no incumbents. I mean, they saw the writing on the wall, I think was part of it. And the GOP is such a disaster. But this particular cycle, there were no incumbents running. So that was an advantage we had.
It's a big advantage. Yeah, okay.
Huge.
Yeah, that said, in 19, I was running against a 14-year incumbent, and Sarah ran against a 12-year incumbent. She won, and I got very, very close. And I think to Kathryn's point, the writing was on the wall, and one of the gentlemen that I ran against for town council this time was a sitting trustee, and so as much as he wasn't an incumbent, he was part of the establishment and part of the town government, and they were, as much as they were not incumbents, we were able to kind of force them into defending the incumbents because of the issues that we were hitting them on. So it in some sense, it could have almost been a more effective strategy.
Okay.
Great. Hey, so I guess thank you very, very much to Kathryn and Greg. Really appreciate it. This was wonderful. So
Thank
helpful.
you. It's such a pleasure to talk about this and share. It was a really exciting time. So it's certainly fun to relive and reflect on it all. So and thank you all for your incredible work. I know all of your names and faces are so familiar from all of your activism and continued efforts. So thank you for everything you do.
Wonderful presentation. You guys should take it on the road.
Yeah, we definitely think that you should take this on the road, and we're going to encourage you to go to a number of the Democratic Committee meetings for sure. And so, listen, I just have to say, very impressive what you've accomplished. I have to underscore that, and your enthusiasm is infectious. We're all going to go out and try to see what we can do to move this forward. I'm going to drop in the chat for those of you who would like to join Peer, a way to do that. And then also, we really are looking to get help from Melanie DeRigo in CD3 by the end of this quarter. So if you can even toss $5, $10, $50 towards that link, that would be really helpful. She's the kind of candidate that we need in Washington serving us all. And also, thanks for your phone number. Kathryn Levy, why don't you drop your contact information again in the chat for those who can.
Yeah, I did before, but I'll do it again. Kathryn Quigley, I have a specific idea that I'm not going to mention here about how you could present something to the Southampton Democrats. So I'll call you or write you about that.
Okay, yeah, I'm much better I'm bad on every platform, so I'm better on texting than email. So.
Texting? Okay, sure.
Hey, the next time we should meet at Greg's brewery, right?
I think that's the best idea.
Oh, yeah.
Then you really won't get me to stop talking.
We're having a victory party on April 6th. It got pushed back because of COVID and Omicron. So our victory party is on April 6th at the brewery. So you're welcome to join us that evening if you like.
Wonderful. I'm a fan of your brews. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you.
Cool.
Have a great night, all. Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody for your time.
Yeah.
Be well.
Bye.
See you next time.